Imagine waking up one day, but something feels off. Not because your body aches or the world outside has changed, but because you realize suddenly, terrifyingly, that the voice in your head is not entirely yours. The thoughts that rise, the judgments that stab, the whispers of fear and shame that guide your actions, they appear so natural, so seamless, that you never question them. Yet now, standing in this moment of fragile awareness, you see it. Your mind has been waging a war against itself, silently, invisibly, all along. It's a war without gunfire or screams, fought not on battlefields, but in the silent corridors of your inner world. You are both the prisoner and the jailer, the victim and the aggressor. And the strangest part, you've grown so used to it, so conditioned by its rhythm, that you mistake the conflict for life itself. How much of what you call yourself is truly you? How many of your decisions are born of freedom? And how many are dictated by subtle chains, expectations, fears, beliefs that you never chose, but inherited? And if the very mind that perceives reality is at war with itself, how can you ever trust the ground you're standing on? The paradox deepens. The mind is the very tool through which you seek truth. Meaning, happiness said, it is also the architect of deception, despair, and self-sabotage. It is both your closest ally and your most cunning adversary. How can something so intimate, so deeply a part of you, simultaneously be your undoing? Think about it. You push yourself to succeed, yet the same voice that urges you forward whispers that you are not enough. You crave love and acceptance, yet the same inner judge convinces you that you are unworthy of it. You dream of peace, yet your thoughts drag you into relentless battles with shadows, regrets of the past, fears of the future, doubts about the present. Every victory you achieve feels fleeting, because another skirmish begins the very next day. Is this what it means to live, to be locked in perpetual conflict with yourself? Or is this the great illusion, the hidden sickness of the modern mind, dressed up as normality? The question lingers, sharp as glass. What if the greatest enemy you will ever face is not out there, in the unpredictable chaos of the world, but in here, in the subtle, unseen layers of your own mind? And yet how strange. If this war is so devastating, why do most people not see it? Why do we continue moving through life as though we are free, when the bars of the cage are built inside our very thoughts? Perhaps because the war is quiet, too quiet. It doesn't announce itself with thunder, it whispers in habits, rationalizations, and compromises so small they escape notice. A man convinces himself he hates his job, but cannot leave, because the voice inside him says he's incapable of anything greater. A woman dreams of freedom, of living on her own terms, yet at every turn her own thoughts paralyze her with fear of failure. A child grows into an adult, never realizing that the harsh inner critic that guides him was planted long ago, shaped by parents, teachers, a society that needed obedience more than authenticity. Do you see the pattern? The war thrives not because it is strong, but because it disguises itself as you. The enemy wears your face, speaks with your tongue, and thinks with your mind. You can run from external oppressors. You can defy authority. You can even conquer the world, but how do you fight an enemy that lives within the very walls of your own consciousness? And here lies the great question, one that few dare to ask. If your mind is not fully your own, if it is divided against itself, then who are you? Who is the I that suffers? Who is the I that observes? Who is the I that longs to break free? This question cuts deeper than philosophy, its existential surgery. For to even attempt an answer, you must risk peeling away the comforting illusions you've carried for years. You must confront the possibility that the self you defend The self you've built your life around is not solid ground, but shifting sand. So we are left here, on the edge of an unsettling precipice. The mind is both creator and destroyer, liberator and tyrant. But what is it, truly? Why does it turn against itself? Why does it sabotage the very being it is supposed to protect? And if this hidden war is so universal, what does it reveal about the human condition itself? The silence grows heavy. Perhaps you feel it already, the tug of recognition, the faint awareness that this war has been shaping your life in ways you never dared admit. But awareness is only the beginning. To understand the true roots of this conflict, we must venture deeper into the shadows of psychology, into the riddles of philosophy, into the very architecture of human consciousness itself. Because until we uncover the hidden problem, the war will rage on. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots, Section 2. The war within the mind does not appear out of nowhere. It has roots, ancient and tangled, buried deep within the soil of human psychology and philosophy. To see them clearly, you must strip away the comfortable belief that you are a singular, unified self. For in truth, what you call you is not one voice, but a chorus often out of tune with itself. Carl Jung once wrote that people do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What he meant was this: inside every human being lies a shadow, a repressed undercurrent of desires, fears, and impulses that the conscious mind seeks to deny. Yet repression does not erase, only buries. And the shadow, unacknowledged, wages its war silently. When you hear that harsh inner critic tearing you down, or when your fears strangle your courage, that is the shadow speaking in disguise. The very parts of yourself you reject turn against you. But why would the mind betray itself? Nietzsche offered one of the most unsettling answers: that human beings, when unable to direct their will outward into the world, turn their aggression inward. Civilization, with its rules and restraints, forces us to suppress instinct, to curb our wildness, to behave. And so, robbed of its natural outlet, the will to power, as Nietzsche called it, mutates into guilt, shame, self-punishment. The battlefield shifts inward. We become our own wardens, carrying the prison within. Arthur Schopenhauer went further still, suggesting that life itself is will-blind, ceaseless striving without ultimate satisfaction. The mind, caught in this endless push and pull, generates suffering as naturally as lungs generate breath. To him, the conflict was not an accident, but the very essence of existence. Desire fuels us forward, dissatisfaction pulls us back. The pendulum swings endlessly, and peace remains an illusion. And yet, this explanation, bleak as it may seem, resonates. Haven't you noticed how victory never satisfies for long? How achieving one goal only sharpens the hunger for another? The mind, restless and unsatisfied, undermines its own peace because its very structure is built upon craving. To live, it seems, is to wrestle endlessly with wanting. Psychology offers its own answers. Freud mapped the psyche as a divided house, the ID, chaotic and instinctual, the superego, rigid and moralistic, and the ego, caught in the middle, straining to negotiate peace. It is a fragile truce, often collapsing under the weight of inner contradictions. Modern cognitive science echoes the same truth. The brain is not a single, harmonious entity, but a network of competing modules and systems, each with its own agenda. What you experience as thought is often the victor of an invisible debate raging beneath awareness. This is the hidden problem, the illusion of unity, the comforting fiction that you are one coherent self. In reality, you are a multiplicity, a shifting battleground of voices, drives, and identities. And when these voices clash, the war begins. But the story does not end there, for society itself fans the flames. From the moment you are born, you are taught what to value, what to fear, what to become. Parents project their unfinished battles onto their children. Schools reward conformity over curiosity. Religions shape morality, sometimes offering solace, sometimes chaining souls with guilt. The culture whispers constantly, be successful but humble, be strong but soft, be free but follow the rules. Contradictions pile upon contradictions, and the mind bends under the strain. Is it any wonder, then, that the psyche fractures? You are told to be authentic, yet punished when your authenticity does not match the mold. You are told to pursue happiness, yet given maps that lead only to more dissatisfaction. You are told to find yourself, yet trained to be anyone but yourself. Jean-Paul Sartre described this as bad faith, the tendency of human beings to live in self-deception, to flee from the terrifying freedom of existence by clinging to roles and masks. We pretend to be fixed, stable beings, but inside, we know the truth. We are always becoming, always unfinished, always uncertain. To admit this would mean facing the abyss of freedom, and so the mind clings to illusions instead. Yet those illusions are fragile, and when they crack, the war intensifies. Viktor Frankl, who endured the unspeakable horrors of concentration camps, saw another root of this inner war, the absence of meaning. Human beings, he argued, can endure almost any suffering if they can see purpose in it. But when meaning collapses, the mind turns against itself. Nihilism seeps in. Anxiety spreads like wildfire. The enemy becomes not just the world, but the very self that cannot find a reason to endure. Perhaps you have felt this yourself, the gnawing emptiness that no success, no relationship, no possession can quite fill. The sense that beneath the busyness, the noise, the goals, there lies a hollowness you dare not look at too long. This is the hidden wound, the unspoken fracture at the heart of the human condition. So here we stand, with philosophy and psychology converging on the same unsettling truth. The war within the mind is not an accident, not a mistake, but almost inevitable. It is born of our divided nature, our repressed shadows, our unfulfilled desires, our cultural conditioning, and our restless search for meaning. But do not mistake recognition for resolution. To know why the war exists is only to sharpen the pain of awareness. For now, you can see it clearly, the voices battling in your own head, the contradictions stitched into your identity, the subtle manipulations of society shaping your desires. Awareness strips away the illusion of peace and reveals the battleground beneath. And yet, the question remains unresolved. If the war is so deeply rooted in the fabric of existence itself, what hope is there of escape? If the very tools you have, your thoughts, your beliefs, your mind are entangled in the conflict, then how can you rise above it? This is where the shadows deepen, because the hidden problem, once unveiled, forces you to confront not just discomfort, but terror. The terror that perhaps you are not who you think you are, and perhaps you never were. And yet, to stop here would be despair. To truly grasp the weight of this war, we must now face its consequences, not abstract, not theoretical, but lived, breathing, and devastating in the daily lives of human beings. Only then will we understand the urgency of rebellion. The Unseen Consequences, Section 3. The mind's subtle war does not always scream, it whispers. And because its whispers are constant, we mistake them for reality. We live inside the echo chamber of our thoughts, without realizing the architecture was built by conflict. The consequences of this are not small, they ripple outward into every corner of existence. Consider the simple act of waking in the morning. Before your eyes even open, the war begins. One voice says, "Get up, today is a new opportunity." Another sneers, "What's the point? You'll only fail again." The first pushes you toward life, the second drags you toward despair. Most of the time, you obey whichever voice shouts the loudest, without ever asking who placed those voices inside your head to begin with. Multiply this by every decision, every relationship, every ambition, and you begin to see how deeply the war shapes a life. What we call personality is often just the residue of battles, won or lost within. What we call fate is often nothing more than the accumulation of small, unnoticed surrenders to inner sabotage. The consequence, a life half-lived. Think of the dreams you abandoned, not because they were impossible, but because you convinced yourself they were. Think of the relationships you never pursued, not because the person rejected you, but because you rejected yourself first. Think of the words you never spoke, the truths you buried, the chances you let rot in silence. The war does not merely torment the present, it strangles the future before it can even take shape. And yet, the devastation is not only personal, it is societal. Entire cultures are built upon the invisible machinery of the mind's war. Marketing preys upon insecurity, amplifying the inner critic until you buy silence in the form of possessions. Politics manipulates fear, turning inner anxiety into collective hysteria. Religion, at times, deepens guilt, promising salvation while keeping the soul chained to shame. A divided mind creates a divided world. Science reveals part of the machinery. Cognitive biases, the shortcuts the brain uses to navigate complexity, often magnify the conflict. Confirmation bias traps us in echo chambers, feeding the very fears we should be questioning. Negativity bias ensures that pain echoes louder than joy, making the inner battlefield tilt always toward despair. The default mode network of the brain, the very system that spins stories of self, is restless, prone to rumination, forever dragging us into rehearsals of past regrets and rehearsals of future disasters. In neurological terms, the mind is wired for war, and the result? A population asleep yet restless, alive yet unfulfilled. People chase success not out of joy but out of fear of inadequacy, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as nothing. They decorate the walls of their prison cells with achievements, pretending the bars do not exist. But perhaps the cruelest consequence of this hidden war is alienation from oneself. You learn to distrust your own instincts, second-guess your own desires, silence your own truth. You become a stranger to yourself, living a script written by voices you do not recognize. How many people walk through life never meeting the deeper self that silently waits beneath the noise? How many die never knowing who they really were? This alienation breeds loneliness, even in the midst of crowds. You can be surrounded by people, even loved, yet feel the quiet ache that no one truly sees you be, because you have not truly seen yourself. You wear masks so skillfully that eventually you forget there was ever a face beneath them. Do you feel it? The subtle exhaustion that never quite goes away. That is the cost of fighting battles you never name. The body knows. Stress chemicals flood the system, raising blood pressure, weakening the immune response, accelerating disease. The war of the mind spills into the flesh, carving its scars into the very cells. Modern epidemics of anxiety, depression, burnout They not the collective symptoms of a species at war with itself. The worst part is how normal it all seems. Because everyone is fighting the same war in silence, we assume it is simply life. We call it being realistic. We call it growing up. We call it responsibility. But underneath these noble names lies surrender to a conflict we never dared to challenge. Imagine for a moment what has been lost. How many inventions, works of art, revolutions of the spirit never came to be because someone's inner war convinced them they were unworthy. How many connections of love, deep and transformative, were never made because fear strangled the words before they could leave the mouth. The unseen consequence of this war is not just suffering, it is the theft of human potential on a staggering scale. And still, the war adapts. Sometimes it cloaks itself in productivity. You work endlessly, not because you love what you do, but because stopping would mean confronting the silence. Inside, sometimes it disguises itself as morality, convincing you that self-denial is virtue, when in truth it is fear. Sometimes it wears the mask of cynicism, whispering that hope is foolish, that joy is naive, because hope and joy would mean daring to rebel. The subtlety is the genius of this enemy. If it screamed, you would fight, but it whispers, and so you obey. If it showed itself as an invader, you would resist, but it wears your face, and so you trust it. And in this way, the war wins without ever being named. So ask yourself, how many of your choices are truly free, and how many are merely the echoes of inner conflict disguised as reason? How much of your suffering is inflicted not by the world, but by the unseen hand of your own mind? And most hauntingly, how much of your life has already been stolen without you ever realizing the theft? These are not comfortable questions. They burn, but they are necessary. Because until you feel the weight of the consequences, you will not feel the urgency of rebellion. Until you see how the war has shaped you, you will never find the courage to fight back. The mind's subtle war against itself leaves scars everywhere. Scars in individuals, scars in societies, scars in history itself. And yet, the story does not end here. For even in the darkest wars, rebellions rise. And perhaps, if you dare to look deeper, you will see that the greatest rebellion is not against the world, but against the illusions within your own mind. The Rebellion, How to Break Free, Section 4. Every war invites rebellion. And if the battlefield is the mind, then the rebellion must be waged there too. But this rebellion is unlike any other. It is not about force, not about weapons, not about domination. It is about clarity. To fight back against the subtle war of the mind, you do not need to shout louder than the voices within. You need to learn to see them for what they are. The first act of rebellion is recognition. Most people live as though their thoughts are commands, as though the inner critic speaks with divine authority. But what if you began to notice that thoughts are just that, thoughts, temporary, shifting, often irrational bursts of mental weather? Like clouds, they pass. Like storms, they rage. But they are not you. You are the sky beneath them. This simple shift distinguishing yourself from the voices in your head is radical. It severs the chains of blind obedience. When the thought arises, you're not good enough, you no longer collapse. You ask instead, whose voice is this? Where did it come from? Why should I believe it? In that moment of questioning, the war falters. The enemy loses its disguise. But rebellion does not stop with questioning. It deepens into confrontation. Jung taught that the shadow, the repressed, denied aspects of the self, must not be exiled, but integrated. To rebel against the war within, you must walk directly into the darkness you fear. You must sit with shame, guilt, rage, desire, and instead of fleeing, ask them what they want. The paradox is that what you repress gains power, while what you face begins to transform. This is not easy. It requires courage to admit that the enemy you have been fighting is not an intruder, but a part of you. But true rebellion is not about destruction, it is about reconciliation. The inner critic, the fearful voice, the restless craving, they are not demons to be slain, but wounded children, fragments of self exiled long ago. To listen to them with compassion is to begin healing the war itself. History shows us what such inner rebellions can spark. The Buddha, sitting beneath the Bodhi tree, did not conquer his mind by force, but by stillness, watching each illusion until it lost its grip. Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius trained themselves daily to separate what is within their control from what is not, refusing to be ruled by fear or desire. Viktor Frankl, amid the horrors of the camps, chose a defiance deeper than rage. He refused to let his captors decide the meaning of his suffering. These are not just stories, they are blueprints for rebellion. But rebellion must also be lived in the ordinary moments of life. It is in the pause before you. Obey the voice that says, "You can't." It is in the breath you take before anger erupts, recognizing that the trigger is not the truth. It is in the courage to act in alignment with your deeper values, even when your mind screams otherwise. Every small act of defiance chips away at the authority of the false voices within. Philosophically, this rebellion requires a shift from identification to observation. Sartre's concept of radical freedom reminds us that we are not fixed identities. We are beings in constant creation. To see yourself as a failure or a coward is to mistake a temporary state for your essence. But you are never finished. At every moment, you are free to choose differently, to create a new self. This recognition terrifies, but it also liberates. The war of the mind thrives on the illusion that you are trapped. Rebellion begins when you see that you are not. Psychologically, it requires learning to live with discomfort. The war intensifies whenever you flee pain because avoidance only feeds it. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches that exposure, facing the fear rather than hiding from it, dissolves its power. Meditation teaches the same through silence. Sit with the storm, and eventually you see that you are not the storm. The rebellion is not glamorous. It is the daily discipline of turning toward what you would rather avoid. Yet rebellion also means refusing the lies of society. It means daring to define success on your own terms, instead of swallowing the poisoned definitions handed down by culture. It means asking, what do I actually value? What life would feel authentic to me, even if no one applauded? To answer honestly is to revolt against conditioning, to begin dismantling the cages constructed by others. But perhaps the deepest rebellion is love. Not the sentimental love of fleeting romance, but the fierce love of the self you have denied. To love the parts of yourself you were taught to despise is an act of defiance. To forgive yourself for past failures is an uprising. To choose kindness toward your own being in a world that profits from your self-hatred is nothing less than revolutionary. Make no mistake, this rebellion will not end the war overnight. The voices will not vanish in a single moment of insight, but slowly, with each act of clarity, each breath of awareness, each choice of authenticity, the war begins to lose ground. You no longer fight blindly, you no longer mistake the enemy for yourself. And in that awareness, the balance of power shifts. The rebellion begins quietly. You sit with your thoughts and see them for what they are. You act according to values, not fears. You forgive yourself. You integrate the shadow. you question the conditioning, and as you do, something astonishing happens. The war that once consumed you begins to dissolve, not through violence, but through understanding. And yet, even rebellion is not the final word. For if you free yourself from the illusions of the mind, a greater question awaits one that transcends even conflict and peace. What lies beyond the war? What ultimate truth waits when the battlefield is finally abandoned? That is where we must go next, to the final realization, the deepest shift, the ultimate truth that redefines everything. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization, Section 5. There comes a moment, after the rebellion, when the battlefield itself begins to fade. The voices grow quieter, the shadows loosen their grip, and in this silence, something unfamiliar emerges. Not another strategy, not another philosophy, but something older, deeper, beyond words. You begin to realize that the greatest illusion of all was not the voices, not the conditioning, not even the war itself. The greatest illusion was the belief that you are the war, that you are the thoughts, the fears, the endless push and pull of inner conflict. The ultimate truth is this: you are not the battlefield. You are not the soldier. You are not the wounds or the victories. You are the awareness beneath them, or the space in which the war plays out. Think of it. For every thought that arises fear, anger, shame, there is also the silent observer who notices it. For every battle waged within, there is something untouched, watching, listening, present. Have you ever asked who this observer is? That silent presence that hears the mind say, "I am worthless," and yet remains untouched by the insult. That is you, the deeper you, the self that is not divided, the self that does not fight. Mystics across ages have pointed to this truth. The Stoics spoke of the inner citadel, an unshakable core untouched by circumstance. The Upanishads of India spoke of the Atman, the self beyond the self, eternal and indivisible. Buddhism points not to a fixed essence, but to awareness itself, pure and luminous, as the ground of liberation. Even modern neuroscience, studying meditation, begins to glimpse this truth, that the constant chatter of the self is not the whole mind, but only a layer, and beneath it lies a vast silence. The war dissolves, not when you win, but when you realize you were never truly a combatant. But this realization does not arrive gently. It is terrifying at first, to recognize that you are not. Your thoughts is to confront the emptiness of identity. If I am not my successes or failures, not my desires or fears, not my stories or roles, then who am I? The answer is not a tidy label. The answer is freedom. You are the space in which all stories arise and fade. You are the awareness that holds both the light and the shadow. You are not broken, you are the sky that never breaks, no matter how many storms pass through it. And once you glimpse this, the consequences are profound. Fear begins to lose its claws. Not because life suddenly becomes safe, but because you are no longer bound to the fragile construct of identity that fear attacks. Shame weakens, because the self it accuses is only a story, not the witness behind it. Even suffering shifts not erased, but transformed, because now it is seen as weather, passing through a sky that endures. The subtle war of the mind feeds on identification. It thrives when you believe the critic is you, when you believe the fear is truth, when you mistake the shadow for your essence. The final rebellion is stepping back far enough to see, this is not me. The war rages, but I am not the war. And then a deeper paradox emerges. Once you see yourself as awareness, you realize the war was never truly an enemy. every battle, every wound, every cry of the inner voices, they were the very catalysts that pushed you toward this realization. Without the conflict, you would never have looked beyond it. Without the darkness, you would not have sought the light. The war against yourself was, in some strange way, the path to discovering the self that cannot be divided. This is the final, most powerful realization. Freedom is not found in conquering the mind, but in transcending it. Peace does not come when the war ends, but when you see that you were never the soldier. The mind fights itself. Yes, but you are not the mind. You are the witness. You are the silence that has always been here, waiting. And from this silence, life looks different. You are no longer a slave to the endless chase of desire. You can enjoy success without being consumed by it, suffer loss without being destroyed by it. You can meet others without the armor of masks, because you no longer confuse masks with identity. You can live more fully, not because the war is gone, but because you know it cannot touch what you truly are. This is not an escape from life, but a deeper entry into it. When you are no longer consumed by the war of the mind, you begin to notice the texture of existence itself, the taste of food, the sound of rain, the warmth of connection, the quiet wonder of simply being. These were always here, but buried beneath the noise. Now they emerge, vivid and unfiltered. So what does this mean for you? It means that the subtle war of the mind, which once seemed like a curse, can become a doorway. Every moment of doubt, every pang of shame, every anxious spiral is not proof of your weakness. It is an invitation to step back, to remember, to return to the awareness that you are. And from that place, you are free. Not free from pain, not free from mortality, not free from uncertainty, but free from the tyranny of believing you are nothing more than the war inside your head. Imagine carrying this truth into your daily life. Imagine waking tomorrow and, when the critic rises, smiling softly, here is the voice again. Imagine facing fear and realizing it is not your master, only a cloud passing through your sky. Imagine living not as a divided self, but as the presence beneath division. This is the ultimate truth. You were never broken. You were never the battlefield. You are the awareness that holds it all, the silence beyond conflict, the freedom that cannot be taken. The mind will still whisper. The shadows will still stir. The war may never vanish entirely, but awake, aware, free will no longer mistake the war for yourself. And in that recognition, the subtle war of the mind loses its power. So the question is no longer, how do I win? The question is, will I remember who I truly am?